The gunshot cracked through the evening air like thunder, sending Hannah Blackburn's heart racing as she gripped her younger sister's trembling hand, both of them sprinting through the overgrown brush on the outskirts of Scottsbluff, Nebraska. The year was 1878, and what had begun as a simple journey west had become a desperate flight for their lives. "Keep running, Lily," Hannah urged, her copper-colored hair falling loose from its pins as they stumbled down a rocky embankment. Her chest heaved with exertion, her long skirts catching on brambles and thorns. "Don't look back." At 22, Hannah had never imagined she would find herself fleeing from a band of outlaws with her 18-year-old sister in tow. Their parents' recent passing had left them with little choice but to accept their uncle's invitation to join him in California. The stagecoach journey had seemed the safest option until the Donovan gang had other ideas. "Hannah, I can't," Lily's words dissolved into gasping breaths as she stumbled, nearly falling. Her fair features were streaked with dirt and tears, her blonde hair tangled with twigs and leaves. "You must," Hannah insisted, pulling her sister upright. She could still hear distant shouts behind them. The outlaws weren't giving up easily. Not after what they'd witnessed. The stagecoach robbery had gone wrong when the driver refused to stop. What followed was a massacre, passengers gunned down without mercy. Somehow, in the chaos, Hannah had pulled Lily from the opposite door while bullets flew overhead. They'd slipped away as the bandits were busy looting the bodies, but not before one of them spotted their escape. Now they were being hunted, two young women alone in unfamiliar territory with night approaching. The fading light was their only advantage. "The river," Hannah panted, pointing toward the sound of rushing water. "If we cross it, we might lose them." Lily nodded, too breathless to speak. Her face was pale with fear, but determination burned in her eyes. The sisters had only each other now, and both knew what would happen if the outlaws caught them. They reached the riverbank just as the sun dipped below the horizon. The water looked cold and swift, but there was no choice. "It's not too deep," Hannah whispered, stepping carefully into the chilly current. "Hold my hand." They were midway across when a voice called out from the tree line they'd just left. "There they are, by the water." Hannah's blood turned to ice as she saw three men on horseback emerging from the trees, their silhouettes menacing against the darkening sky. One of them raised a rifle. "Run!" she screamed, and they splashed desperately toward the opposite bank, water soaking their heavy skirts. The rifle crack sent up a spray of water inches from Hannah's face. Lily screamed, stumbling as they finally reached the far bank, scrambling up the muddy incline on hands and knees. "Into the trees," Hannah gasped, pulling Lily toward the dense forest ahead. The darkness would be their ally now, but the men would surely cross the river soon. They plunged into the woods, the dense canopy instantly swallowing them in shadow. Hannah had no idea where they were headed. Her only thought was to put as much distance as possible between them and their pursuers. The sound of horses splashing through the river spurred them forward. Hannah's lungs burned, and her legs felt like lead, but fear drove her onward. Lily was beginning to lag behind, her breathing ragged. "Just a little farther," Hannah urged, though she had no destination in mind, no safe haven she could promise. They stumbled through a small clearing and Hannah froze. Ahead, a faint light glimmered through the trees. "Look," she whispered, "a cabin." It was barely visible in the gathering darkness, a small, sturdy structure with a thin wisp of smoke rising from the chimney. Someone was home. "What if they're dangerous too?" Lily whispered, her voice quavering. Hannah swallowed hard. "We have no choice. We'll freeze out here, or those men will find us." Behind them, angry voices called to each other as the outlaws spread out to search the woods. Decision made, Hannah pulled Lily toward the cabin. As they drew closer, she could see it was well maintained, with a small corral where a couple of horses dozed. A dog began to bark as they approached, a deep warning sound. "Please," Hannah murmured, "let whoever lives here be merciful." They had barely reached the small porch when the door swung open, revealing a tall figure silhouetted against the warm light within. A rifle barrel gleamed in his hands, pointed directly at them. "That's far enough," said a deep, cautious voice. "State your business." Hannah pushed Lily slightly behind her. "Please, sir," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "My sister and I are in terrible danger. Some men are after us. They killed everyone on our stagecoach. We're just looking for shelter." The man didn't lower his rifle, but he tilted his head, studying them. The dog, a large, shaggy beast, had come around from behind the cabin and was sniffing at their skirts with interest. "How many men?" he asked. "At least 3, maybe more," Hannah answered. "They're right behind us, please. We don't have much time." As if to confirm her words, a distant shout echoed through the trees. For a long, tense moment, the man said nothing. Then, decisively, he lowered his rifle. "Get inside, now." Relief flooded through Hannah as she hurried Lily up the steps. The man's face became visible as they entered the warm cabin, lean and weathered, with piercing blue eyes beneath a shock of sandy hair. He couldn't have been more than 30, with broad shoulders and the unmistakable bearing of someone who knew how to handle himself in trouble. "Flynn O'Connor," he said curtly as he closed the door behind them. "And you'd be?" "Hannah Blackburn," she replied, her voice shaking with relief and residual fear. "This is my sister, Lily." Flynn moved swiftly around the small cabin, extinguishing lamps until only the fire in the hearth provided light. "Stay away from the windows," he instructed, peering through a small gap in the curtains. "Buckskin," he addressed the dog, "quiet now." The dog immediately ceased its low growling and settled by the fire, though its eyes remained alert. Hannah took in her surroundings. The cabin was small but neat, with a table and chairs, a cook stove, a few shelves of supplies, and a curtained-off area she assumed was for sleeping. It smelled of coffee, wood smoke, and leather. "Thank you," she whispered. "I don't know what we would have." Flynn raised a hand for silence, his expression intent as he listened. Outside, the sound of horses approaching made Hannah's heart leap into her throat. She pulled Lily close, both of them trembling. "Under the bed," Flynn said urgently, motioning toward the curtained area. "Both of you now, don't make a sound no matter what you hear." They hurried to obey, crawling beneath a sturdy wooden bed frame. Flynn quickly arranged the hanging quilt to hide them from view, then returned to the main room. Through a small gap, Hannah could see him grab a book and settle into a chair by the fire, rifle propped casually beside him. He looked for all the world like a man enjoying a quiet evening alone. Moments later, heavy footsteps sounded on the porch, followed by a pounding on the door. "Evening," called a rough voice. "Anyone home?" Flynn took his time answering, marking his place in the book before rising to open the door. "Can I help you?" His tone was neutral, unhurried. "Looking for 2 women," said the voice. "Young, one fair-haired, one with reddish hair. Seen anyone pass this way?" Hannah held her breath, her arm tight around Lily's shoulders. "Can't say that I have," Flynn replied easily. "Been sitting here reading since sundown. My dog would have let me know if anyone was around. Mind if we take a look inside?" There was a pause, and Hannah could imagine Flynn blocking the doorway. "Actually, I do mind," he said, his voice hardening. "I don't know you, and I don't take kindly to strangers wanting to search my home at this hour." "Listen here." "No, you listen," Flynn cut in, his tone suddenly dangerous. "I've got a loaded Winchester and a mean dog who doesn't like unfamiliar faces. I'm telling you, no one's passed this way. Now you can either believe me and move on, or we can have a problem." Silence stretched for several heartbeats. "Those girls are thieves." The outlaw tried another approach. "Stole valuable property. There's a reward for their capture." Flynn chuckled, a sound devoid of humor. "I've been ranching in this valley for 6 years. I know every honest man within 50 miles, and you boys ain't among them. Now I'll say it one more time, move on." Hannah could hear muffled discussion outside, then the outlaw spoke again. "Fine, but if you see them, they're dangerous. Wouldn't want a nice fellow like yourself getting hurt." "I appreciate your concern," Flynn replied dryly. "Good night, gentlemen." The door closed firmly, and Hannah heard the sound of a heavy bar being slid into place. Flynn's boots crossed the wooden floor, and he peered out the window. "Stay put," he called softly to them. "They're still hanging around." For what seemed an eternity, Hannah and Lily remained motionless beneath the bed, listening to the occasional creak of floorboards as Flynn moved about the cabin. Finally, his footsteps approached the curtained area. "They've gone," he said, pulling back the quilt. "For now, at least." Hannah crawled out, helping Lily follow. Both sisters were filthy, their dresses torn and muddy, hair disheveled. "Thank you," Hannah said again, meeting Flynn's steady gaze. "You saved our lives." Flynn nodded, studying them with a critical eye. "You're both soaked through. Need to get you dry before you catch your death." He moved to a chest at the foot of the bed and pulled out 2 worn shirts and a pair of trousers. These will have to do until your things dry. There's water in that pitcher to wash up. I'll give you privacy. As he turned to go, Hannah caught his arm. Those men, they're killers. They murdered everyone on our stagecoach. We saw their faces. Flynn's expression darkened. The Donovan gang, I'd wager. They've been terrorizing this area for months. He glanced toward the window. They won't give up easy knowing you can identify them. What will we do? Lily asked, speaking for the first time since they'd entered the cabin. Her voice was small and frightened. Flynn considered this. For tonight, you rest. They won't try anything more before morning. Tomorrow we'll figure out our next move. He paused. Are you hungry? As if in answer, Hannah's stomach growled audibly. She blushed, realizing they hadn't eaten since the meager breakfast at the stagecoach station that morning. A hint of a smile touched Flynn's lips. I'll heat up some stew while you change. He left them alone, pulling the curtain closed behind him. Hannah helped Lily out of her wet clothes, then changed herself, both of them grateful for Flynn's clean, if oversized, garments. The simple act of being dry again brought tears of relief to Hannah's eyes. When they emerged from behind the curtain, Flynn had bowls of steaming stew waiting on the table, along with chunks of cornbread. He'd relit one lamp, keeping it low. It's not fancy, he said, but it's hot. The sisters fell upon the food with unladylike eagerness, too hungry to be concerned with manners. Flynn watched them for a moment, then busied himself hanging their wet clothes near the fire to dry. How long have you lived here? Hannah asked between mouthfuls, trying to learn more about their rescuer. 6 years, Flynn replied. Came out from Pennsylvania after the war, wanted open space and quiet. You live alone, he nodded. Just me and Buckskin. At the mention of his name, the dog thumped his tail against the floor. Hannah studied Flynn as she ate. There was a solidity to him, a quiet competence that was reassuring in their desperate circumstances. His cabin, though simple, showed care in its maintenance. This was a man who took pride in his independence. Where were you headed? Flynn asked, finally sitting down with his own bowl. California, Lily answered. Our uncle lives in Sacramento. After our parents died, he was kind enough to send for us. Flynn's expression softened slightly. I'm sorry for your loss. Thank you, Hannah said quietly. It's been a difficult year. They finished their meal in companionable silence. The warmth of the cabin, combined with the terror and exertion of the day, was making Hannah's eyelids heavy, Flynn noticed. You two take the bed, he said, standing to clear the dishes. I'll keep watch tonight. We couldn't possibly, Hannah began to protest. You can and you will, Flynn said firmly. No arguments. Too exhausted to fight, Hannah and Lily gratefully accepted the offered bed. As they settled beneath the warm quilts, Hannah could hear Flynn moving about the cabin, checking windows and doors. Do you think we're safe? Lily whispered. Hannah looked toward the curtain where she could see Flynn's shadow as he settled into a chair facing the door, rifle across his lap. Yes, she said softly, surprising herself with how much she meant it. I think we are. Sleep claimed them both almost immediately, the first peaceful rest they'd had in days. Hannah woke to sunlight filtering through the cabin's small window. For a moment she was disoriented, until the events of the previous day came flooding back. Lily still slept beside her, her breathing deep and even. Carefully, Hannah slipped from the bed, still wearing Flynn's oversized shirt. She padded to the curtain and peered out. Flynn was at the cook stove, his back to her as he prepared what smelled like coffee and bacon. Buckskin noticed her immediately, thumping his tail in greeting. Flynn turned, alerted by the dog. Morning, he said quietly. Hope you slept well. Better than I expected to, Hannah admitted, suddenly self-conscious about her appearance. She tucked a strand of tangled hair behind her ear. Have you been up all night? Most of it. He poured a cup of coffee and offered it to her. No sign of trouble. Hannah accepted the cup gratefully, the warmth seeping into her fingers. Our clothes, dry, folded them on the chair there. He nodded toward a small chair in the corner. Thank you, I'll wake Lily and we'll get dressed. Flynn nodded, turning back to the stove. Breakfast will be ready when you are. Hannah woke her sister, and they quickly changed back into their own clothes, doing their best to make themselves presentable with the limited resources available. Hannah used Flynn's comb to work the tangles from both their hair, wincing at the state of her reflection in the small mirror hanging on the wall. When they emerged, Flynn had breakfast laid out: bacon, biscuits, and more coffee. They ate hungrily, the fear of the previous day having given way to ravenous appetite. "I need to check on my livestock," Flynn said as they finished. "You should stay inside, away from the windows. Those men could still be searching the area." "Of course," Hannah agreed. "We can clean up here while you're gone." Flynn looked surprised at the offer but nodded. "Much appreciated." After he left, Hannah and Lily set to work washing the dishes and tidying the small cabin. It was the least they could do for the man who had sheltered them. "He seems kind," Lily observed as she dried a plate. "Not like the stories Papa used to tell about rough Westerners." Hannah nodded, thinking of Flynn's quiet competence and unexpected gentleness. "We're fortunate he was home when we needed help." They had just finished when the door opened and Flynn returned. His expression was grim. "Found tracks all around the property," he reported. "They've been scouting the place, must have come back after I thought they'd left." Hannah's momentary sense of security evaporated. "Do you think they know we're here?" "Can't say for certain, but they're suspicious enough to keep watching." He ran a hand through his hair. "You can't leave yet, it's too dangerous. And frankly, you staying here might not be safe either, if they decide to search the cabin properly." "What can we do?" Lily asked, fear returning to her voice. Flynn thought for a moment. "There's a root cellar beneath the cabin. Small, but it would hide you if they come back." Hannah nodded, trying to project a confidence she didn't feel. "Then that's what we'll do." "In the meantime," Flynn continued, "I need to ride into town. Get supplies, see what I can learn about the Donovan's movements. If I stay holed up here, it'll look suspicious." "Is town far?" Hannah asked. "Scottsbluff's about an hour's ride." "I usually go once a week anyway, so it won't seem unusual." He began gathering items into a saddlebag. "While I'm gone, stay inside and keep quiet. If anyone approaches, get to the root cellar immediately. Entrance is under the rug by the stove." Hannah felt a chill at the thought of being left alone, but she understood the necessity. "We will." Flynn hesitated, then reached into a drawer and pulled out a small revolver. "Do you know how to use this?" Hannah shook her head. "It's simple enough. Pull the hammer back, aim, pull the trigger." He demonstrated, careful to keep the barrel pointed away from them. 6 shots, only use it if you have no other choice. Hannah took the weapon gingerly, its weight unfamiliar in her hand. "I hope to be back by mid-afternoon," Flynn said, heading for the door. "Bar it behind me and don't open it for anyone but me. I'll knock 3 times, pause, then twice more." "Be careful," Hannah said, surprising herself with the depth of concern in her voice. Flynn's eyes met hers, something unreadable passing between them. "Always am." After he left, Hannah secured the door as instructed. The cabin felt suddenly smaller without his presence, more vulnerable. She placed the revolver on the table within easy reach and sat down beside Lily. "What do we do now?" her sister asked. "We wait," Hannah replied, trying to sound more confident than she felt. "And we pray Mr. O'Connor returns safely." The morning stretched into afternoon with painful slowness. The sisters spoke in hushed tones, sharing memories of home and parents, careful to avoid the subject of their uncertain future. Every sound from outside made them tense, ready to flee to the hiding place Flynn had shown them. It was nearly 3 o'clock when they heard horses approaching. Hannah grabbed the revolver and motioned for Lily to pull back the corner of the rug, revealing the trap door to the root cellar. "Quickly," she whispered, helping Lily down the narrow ladder. She followed, pulling the door closed above them just as footsteps sounded on the porch. The cellar was dark and cramped, smelling of earth and preserved vegetables. Hannah held Lily close, both of them barely breathing as they listened to the sounds above. The door rattled as someone tried to open it, followed by a muffled curse. Then came the sound of breaking glass, a window being forced. Heavy boots moved across the floorboards over their heads. More than one set. "Empty," a gruff voice said. "Check everywhere," another replied. "Those girls didn't just vanish." Hannah's grip tightened on the revolver as the men moved around the cabin, opening cupboards, moving furniture. One set of footsteps came dangerously close to the trapdoor, pausing directly above them. Hannah held her breath, her heart pounding so loudly she was certain they would hear it. After what seemed an eternity, the footsteps moved away. "Nothing," the first voice said. "Maybe that rancher was telling the truth." "Don't be a fool," the second man snapped. "Those tracks we found led straight here. He's hiding them somewhere." "Well, they ain't here now." "Then we wait for him to return, have a little chat." Hannah's blood ran cold. They were planning to ambush Flynn when he returned. What about the others? Wilson wanted us back by sundown. There was a pause. Fine, we'll come back tomorrow with more men, tear the place apart if we have to. The sisters remained motionless as the men left the cabin, the sound of horses receding into the distance. Even then, they waited a full 30 minutes before Hannah dared open the trapdoor. The cabin was a mess. Drawers had been emptied, Flynn's few belongings scattered across the floor. One window was broken, letting in a cool breeze. "They're going to come back," Lily said, her voice trembling, "and they'll kill Mr. O'Connor for helping us." Hannah knew her sister was right. They couldn't stay not if it meant putting Flynn in danger, but where could they go? They had no money, no transportation, no knowledge of the area. "We need to warn him," Hannah decided. "When he returns, we'll tell him what we heard. Perhaps he can take us to the sheriff in town." They set about cleaning the cabin, trying to restore order to the chaos the outlaws had left. It was the least they could do for the man who had risked so much for them. It was nearly sunset when they heard the distinctive 3 knocks, pause, then 2 more. Hannah rushed to unbar the door, relief flooding through her at the sight of Flynn's tall frame. His eyes widened as he took in the state of the cabin, then narrowed with concern as he looked at Hannah. "Are you hurt?" "No, we hid as you told us to, but they searched everywhere. They know you're helping us." The words tumbled out as Hannah pulled him inside. They planned to return tomorrow with more men. Flynn's expression hardened as he set down his supplies. "I figured as much. There's talk in town about the stagecoach robbery, 7 people dead, 2 women missing. The Donovans are telling everyone you're thieves who killed a passenger and stole his valuables." "That's a lie," Lily exclaimed. "Of course it is," Flynn agreed, "but it serves their purpose, keeps folks from helping you." He sighed heavily. "Sheriff's in their pocket anyway, has been for years." "What can we do?" Hannah asked, desperation creeping into her voice. Flynn was quiet for a moment, thinking. "We need to get you somewhere safer than this. I have a friend who runs a ranch about 20 miles north. Good man, trustworthy. You could stay there while I figure out how to get you to California." Hope flickered in Hannah's chest. "When can we leave?" "Tonight," Flynn decided. "Under cover of darkness. The Donovans are likely watching the main trails, but I know ways through the hills they won't expect." "Thank you," Hannah said earnestly, touching his arm. "We can never repay you for what you're risking for us." Flynn's expression softened as he looked down at her. "No need for that kind of talk, just doing what's right." For the next hour, they prepared for the journey. Flynn packed food and supplies while Hannah and Lily gathered their meager belongings. The plan was simple. Travel by night, hide by day, reach the safety of Flynn's friend's ranch by the following evening. As darkness fell, Flynn saddled 3 horses, his own sturdy bay, a gentle mare for Lily and a dappled gray for Hannah. "Can you ride?" he asked as he helped Hannah mount. "Our father taught us," she assured him, settling into the saddle with practiced ease despite her skirts. "Though it's been some time." Flynn nodded approvingly, then helped Lily onto her horse. Buckskin would stay behind to guard the cabin, making it appear as though Flynn might return at any moment. They set out under a moonless sky, Flynn leading them away from the main trails and into the rugged hills that bordered his property. The going was slow, the terrain difficult to navigate in the darkness, but Flynn seemed to know every rock and tree. Hannah found herself studying his silhouette as he rode ahead of them. There was something compelling about this quiet, capable man who had risked everything to help 2 strangers. In the short time they'd known him, he had shown more kindness than many men she'd known her entire life. They rode in silence for several hours, the only sounds the soft clop of hooves on earth and the occasional call of a night bird. The land around them was vast and wild, unlike anything Hannah had known in their small Pennsylvania town. Despite the danger, she couldn't help but feel a strange sense of freedom. Near midnight, they stopped in a small grove of trees beside a creek to rest the horses. Lily, exhausted, nearly fell asleep leaning against her mare's side. Flynn gently guided her to sit on a fallen log while he checked the animals. Hannah approached him as he loosened his horse's cinch. "How much farther?" she asked quietly. "We're making good time," he replied. "Another 15 miles or so. We'll rest here for an hour, then push on." Hannah nodded, wrapping her arms around herself against the night's chill. Flynn noticed and shrugged out of his jacket, draping it around her shoulders. "Oh no, I couldn't," she began to protest. "Take it," he insisted. "I'm used to the cold." The jacket was warm from his body, carrying his scent of leather, wood smoke, and something uniquely him. Hannah pulled it closer, inexplicably comforted. "Why are you helping us?" she asked suddenly. "You could have turned us away. It would have been safer for you." Flynn was quiet for a long moment. "My sister was about your age when she died," he finally said, his voice low. "Influenza. I was away fighting in the war, couldn't get home in time. Always wondered if things might have been different if someone had been there to help her." Hannah's heart ached at the pain evident in his voice. "I'm sorry," he shrugged, as if dismissing the memory. "Long time ago now." "Still," Hannah said gently, "she would be proud of the man you've become." Flynn looked at her then, really looked at her, surprise and something warmer in his eyes. Before he could respond, a twig snapped in the darkness beyond their small grove. Flynn's hand immediately went to his rifle. "Stay with Lily," he whispered, moving silently toward the sound. Hannah hurried to her sister's side, heart pounding. Had the Donovans found them already? Long minutes passed in tense silence. Then Flynn returned, relief evident in his posture. "Just a deer," he said. "But we should move on. No sense taking chances." They continued their journey, the terrain growing increasingly rough as Flynn led them through narrow passes and dry creek beds. Twice they had to dismount and lead the horses over particularly difficult stretches. By the time the eastern sky began to lighten, Hannah was exhausted, her muscles aching from hours in the saddle. "There," Flynn said, pointing to a rocky outcropping ahead. "We'll rest there until nightfall. It's defensible, and there's water nearby." The small cave he led them to was barely more than a hollow in the rock face, but it offered shelter and was hidden from casual observation. Flynn tended the horses while Hannah laid out blankets for herself and Lily, who was swaying with fatigue. "Try to sleep," Hannah told her sister, helping her lie down. "We're safe for now." Lily didn't need to be told twice, falling asleep almost instantly. Hannah found herself too keyed up for rest despite her exhaustion. She joined Flynn at the cave entrance where he was keeping watch. "You should sleep too," he said, glancing at her. "Soon," she promised, sitting beside him. "My mind is too full at the moment." They sat in companionable silence, watching the sunrise paint the landscape in gold and amber. It was breathtakingly beautiful, this wild country that Flynn called home. "Tell me about your ranch," Hannah said after a while. Flynn smiled slightly. "It's nothing grand. 100 acres, small herd of cattle, few horses, enough to keep me busy and fed." "You manage it all alone," he nodded. "Hire help during calving season and roundup, otherwise it's just me." "Don't you get lonely?" Hannah asked before she could stop herself. Flynn seemed to consider the question seriously. "Sometimes, but after the war I needed the quiet, the space to think without people everywhere." He glanced at her. "What about you? What was your life like before all this?" Hannah thought of the small house in Harrisburg where she'd grown up, her father's clockmaking shop, her mother's garden. "Simple," she said softly. "Happy until my parents fell ill last winter, father first, then mother not a month later. And now California. Our uncle is our only remaining family. He owns an import business in Sacramento. He's promised positions for both Lily and me." Hannah sighed. "Though how we'll get there now, I have no idea. One problem at a time," Flynn advised. "First, we get you safely to my friend's ranch. Then we'll figure out the rest." His quiet confidence was reassuring. Hannah found herself studying his profile, the strong jaw covered in several days' stubble, the straight nose, the eyes that seemed to see everything. He was handsome in a rugged, unpolished way that was far removed from the proper gentleman she'd known back east. Something stirred within her, a warmth that had nothing to do with the rising sun. Startled by the feeling, Hannah looked away quickly. "You should rest," Flynn said again, misinterpreting her sudden discomfort. "I'll keep watch." Hannah nodded, grateful for the excuse to retreat. She settled on the blanket beside Lily, trying to quiet her thoughts. Despite everything, sleep claimed her quickly. Her last conscious thought an image of Flynn's face illuminated by the dawn light. She woke to Flynn's hand on her shoulder, gently shaking her awake. The light in the cave had shifted. It was late afternoon. "Time to eat something before we move on," he said, offering her a strip of jerky and a biscuit. Hannah sat up, accepting the food gratefully. Lily was already awake, drinking water from a canteen. "Any sign of trouble?" Hannah asked between bites. Flynn shook his head. "All quiet. But we should still move carefully tonight." They prepared to depart as the sun began to set, Flynn checking each horse meticulously before allowing them to mount. The second night's travel was easier in some ways, the terrain less rugged, their bodies more accustomed to the rhythm of riding. Flynn seemed more relaxed as well, occasionally pointing out landmarks or sharing brief stories about his life in the territory. It was near midnight when Flynn suddenly raised his hand, signaling for them to stop. He sat motionless in his saddle, listening intently. "What is it?" Hannah whispered. "Riders," he murmured, "coming fast." Now Hannah could hear it too, the thunder of approaching horses, still distant but drawing nearer. "Off the trail," Flynn ordered, leading them into a dense stand of trees. "Quickly." They dismounted, Flynn instructing them to hold the horses' muzzles to keep them quiet. They stood absolutely still, barely breathing as the sound grew louder. Moments later, 4 riders galloped past on the trail below, heading in the direction they'd come from. Even in the darkness, Hannah recognized the silhouette of the lead rider, the same man who had confronted Flynn at his cabin door. "The Donovans," she breathed once they'd passed. Flynn nodded grimly. "Heading toward my place, most likely. Good thing we left when we did." They waited several minutes to ensure the riders were truly gone before continuing on their way, now moving with even greater caution. Flynn led them off the trail entirely, navigating by stars and his own intimate knowledge of the land. It was nearly dawn when they crested a rise and saw, in the valley below, a cluster of buildings, a substantial ranch house, barn, corrals, and several outbuildings. "Jenkins' place," Flynn said, clear relief in his voice. "We made it." Hannah felt tears prick her eyes. After 2 days of fear and flight, the sight of civilization, even this remote outpost of it, was overwhelming. They approached the ranch as the first rays of sunlight touched the buildings. A dog began barking, followed by a rooster's crow. A man emerged from the barn, rifle in hand, peering suspiciously at the approaching riders. "Jenkins," Flynn called. "It's O'Connor." The man lowered his rifle, raising a hand in greeting. As they drew closer, Hannah could see he was older, perhaps in his 50s, with a weathered face and iron gray hair. "Flynn," Jenkins said as they dismounted, "wasn't expecting you." His eyes moved to Hannah and Lily with undisguised curiosity. "Need your help, old friend," Flynn said, his voice low. "These ladies are in trouble. The Donovan gang is after them." Jenkins' expression darkened. "Come inside, all of you. Martha will have breakfast ready." The ranch house was warm and inviting, smelling of coffee and fresh bread. Martha Jenkins, a plump, motherly woman with kind eyes, took one look at Hannah and Lily and immediately bustled them off to wash up while the men talked. "You poor dears," she clucked, leading them to a bedroom with a basin of warm water. "Look at the state of you. Never mind, we'll get you sorted." The simple luxury of washing with soap and warm water brought fresh tears to Hannah's eyes. Martha provided clean clothes, simple skirts and blouses that were slightly too large but blessedly clean. By the time the sisters emerged, looking considerably more presentable, breakfast was on the table. Flynn and Jenkins were deep in conversation, heads bent close together over cups of coffee. Both men stood when the women entered. "Sit, eat," Martha urged, placing platters of eggs, bacon, and biscuits before them. "You look half-starved." Hannah hadn't realized how hungry she was until the food was in front of her. She and Lily ate with hearty appreciation while Flynn explained their situation to the Jenkinses. "The Donovans are saying these girls robbed and murdered a passenger on the stagecoach," he concluded. "It's their word against the girls, and with Sheriff Blackwood in their pocket." "Blackwood's as corrupt as they come," Jenkins agreed grimly. "Been that way for years." "The girls need to get to California," Flynn continued. "Their uncle's in Sacramento." Martha patted Hannah's hand. "You'll stay here as long as needed, dears. We have plenty of room." "That's very kind," Hannah said, "but we've already put Mr. O'Connor in terrible danger. We couldn't possibly endanger you as well." "Nonsense," Jenkins said firmly. "The Donovans don't scare us." "Besides, they have no reason to look for you here," Flynn nodded. "That's what I was thinking. You can stay while I figure out how to get you safely to California." "What about your ranch?" Hannah asked, concerned. "If they destroy it," Flynn's expression hardened. "Let them try. I built it once, I can build it again." After breakfast, Jenkins showed Flynn to a guest room where he could rest. Hannah and Lily were given a room to share, with real beds and clean sheets, luxuries that seemed almost unimaginable after the past few days. Despite her exhaustion, Hannah found sleep elusive. She kept thinking about Flynn, about the risks he'd taken for them, about the quiet strength that radiated from him. When she finally drifted off, her dreams were a confused jumble of gunshots, galloping horses, and Flynn's blue eyes. She woke to early afternoon sunlight streaming through the window. Lily was still sleeping soundly beside her. Hannah rose quietly, dressed, and made her way to the kitchen, where she found Martha kneading bread dough. "There you are, dear," the older woman greeted her warmly. "Feel better after some rest?" "Much, thank you," Hannah replied, suddenly shy. "Can I help with anything?" Martha smiled. "You can slice those apples for pie if you'd like. Flynn's partial to apple pie." Hannah blushed at the knowing look in Martha's eyes, but took up the knife and began slicing the fruit. "You've known Mr. O'Connor a long time, since he first came to these parts," Martha confirmed. "He helped George Mr. Jenkins when a mountain lion was killing our calves. Tracked it for 3 days straight, been friends ever since." She punched down the dough with practiced hands. "He's a good man, quiet, keeps to himself mostly, but you won't find anyone more loyal or honest." Hannah nodded, focusing on the apples. "He's been incredibly kind to us. I don't know what would have happened if he hadn't taken us in." "Some things are meant to be," Martha said cryptically. "The Lord works in mysterious ways." They worked together companionably, Martha sharing stories of life on the ranch while Hannah helped prepare dinner. It felt normal, peaceful, a stark contrast to the terror of the past days. Flynn and Jenkins appeared as the sun began to set, having spent the afternoon checking the property and making plans. Flynn looked rested, though concern still lined his face. "Any news?" Hannah asked as they sat down to dinner, Lily joining them looking refreshed from her long sleep. Jenkins shook his head. "No sign of trouble, but that doesn't mean they've given up." "I need to go back to my place," Flynn said, meeting Hannah's worried gaze. "See what's happened, collect Buckskin. I can't leave him there indefinitely." "Is that safe?" Hannah couldn't keep the concern from her voice. "I'll be careful," Flynn assured her. "I'll go tonight, be back by morning." Hannah wanted to protest, but knew she had no right to ask more of him than he'd already given. She nodded, trying to hide her fear. After dinner, as Flynn prepared to leave, Hannah followed him to the barn. He was checking his saddle when she approached. "I wanted to thank you again," she said softly, "and to ask you to be careful." Flynn turned to face her, his expression softening. "I will. I couldn't bear it if something happened to you because of us," Hannah continued, the words spilling out despite herself. "You've done so much already, and she stopped, suddenly aware of how close they were standing, of the warmth in his eyes as he looked down at her. Something unspoken passed between them, a current of feeling that made her breath catch. Flynn reached out slowly, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. His fingers lingered against her cheek. "I'll come back," he said, his voice low and husky. "I promise." The moment stretched between them, fragile and charged with possibility. Then Flynn stepped back, clearing his throat. "You'll be safe here. Jenkins and his hands will make sure of it." Hannah nodded, unable to trust her voice. She watched as he mounted his horse and rode away, a strange ache in her chest that had nothing to do with fear. Back in the house, Martha gave her a knowing look but said nothing. Hannah retired early, pleading fatigue, though sleep was far from her mind. She lay awake for hours, thinking of Flynn riding alone through the dangerous night, praying for his safe return. Morning came with no sign of him. By noon, Hannah was pacing anxiously, watching the road for any sign of his approach. Jenkins tried to reassure her, suggesting various innocent reasons for the delay, but she could see the concern in his eyes as well. By mid-afternoon, Jenkins decided to send one of his ranch hands to investigate. The young man had just saddled his horse when a rider appeared on the horizon. Hannah's heart leaped, then plummeted as she realized it wasn't Flynn but a stranger, a young man riding hard, his horse lathered with sweat. Jenkins met him at the gate. Words were exchanged, too distant for Hannah to hear, but she saw Jenkins' posture stiffen. When he turned back toward the house, his expression was grim. "What is it?" Hannah asked, rushing to meet him. "Is it Flynn?" Jenkins nodded solemnly. "The Donovans found him at his place last night. There was a fight. He's alive but hurt bad. They've got him at Doc Miller's place in town." Hannah felt as though the ground had dropped from beneath her feet. I have to go to him, she said immediately. That's exactly what they want, Jenkins warned. They'll be watching for you. I don't care, Hannah insisted, a fierce determination taking hold. This happened because of us. I won't hide while he suffers. Jenkins studied her face, then sighed deeply. You're as stubborn as he is, I see. He turned to the messenger. Tell Martha to prepare supplies and find Simmons. Tell him to ready the wagon. Within the hour, they were on their way to town. Hannah, Jenkins, and 2 armed ranch hands. Lily stayed behind with Martha, though she'd protested until Hannah firmly insisted. One of us should stay safe, Hannah had told her sister. If something happens to me, you'll still have a chance to reach Uncle. The journey to Scottsbluff took 3 tense hours. Hannah sat rigid beside Jenkins, her mind racing with terrible possibilities. How badly was Flynn hurt? Would the Donovans be waiting for them? Was she risking not only her life, but those of Jenkins and his men as well? Scottsbluff appeared on the horizon as the sun began to set, a small frontier town of wooden buildings lining a dusty main street. Jenkins drove the wagon directly to a small house on the edge of town with a weathered sign reading Dr. J. Miller, physician. Wait here, Jenkins instructed the ranch hands. Keep your eyes open. He helped Hannah down from the wagon and they approached the door together. A bell jingled as they entered a small waiting room. A middle-aged man in a stained apron appeared from a back room, his expression wary. George Jenkins, he said, recognition dawning. And who might this be? Hannah Blackburn, she answered before Jenkins could speak. We're here to see Flynn O'Connor. The doctor's eyes narrowed slightly. You'd be one of the women the Donovans are looking for then. Hannah lifted her chin. I am, and Mr. O'Connor was injured helping us. Please, how is he? Dr. Miller studied her for a long moment, then sighed. He's stable. Took a bullet to the shoulder, another grazed his side, lost a fair amount of blood, but he's tough. If infection doesn't set in, he should recover. Relief made Hannah's knees weak. May I see him? The doctor hesitated, then nodded. Briefly, he needs rest more than visitors. He led them to a small room at the back of the house. Flynn lay on a narrow bed, his face pale against the white pillowcase, his shoulder and torso bandaged. His eyes were closed, but they fluttered open as Hannah approached. You shouldn't be here, he said, his voice weak but tinged with anger. It's not safe. Hannah ignored his protest, moving to his bedside. What happened? Flynn grimaced. Ambush. They were waiting when I got home. Buckskin warned me, but not in time. His eyes sought Jenkins. The dog, shot but alive, Jenkins assured him. My boys brought him back to the ranch. Martha's nursing him. Flynn nodded, clearly relieved. His gaze returned to Hannah, softening despite his obvious pain. You need to leave town now. The Donovans have men watching the doctor's place. I'm not leaving you, Hannah said firmly. Stubborn woman, Flynn muttered, but there was no real heat in the words. Dr. Miller cleared his throat. He needs rest. And frankly, all of you need to decide what you're doing. Sheriff Blackwood's been by twice asking about O'Connor, says he wants to question him about harboring fugitives. Jenkins snorted. Blackwood's just looking for an excuse to let the Donovans finish what they started. The doctor didn't disagree. Either way, you can't stay here. It's not safe for any of you. Can he be moved? Hannah asked. Miller frowned. Not ideal, but yes, if you're careful. The bleeding stopped and the bullets are out. Jenkins nodded decisively. Then we're taking him back to the ranch tonight. Hannah, stay with Flynn while I make arrangements. As Jenkins and the doctor left to discuss details, Hannah sat beside Flynn, taking his hand in hers. His skin was hot, too hot. You have a fever, she said worriedly. It'll pass, Flynn murmured, his eyes never leaving her face. Hannah, I need you to understand, the Donovans won't stop, not until they're sure you can't testify against them. I know, she whispered. But I can't let you face them alone, not anymore. Flynn's fingers tightened around hers. I've been alone a long time, was getting used to it. A faint smile touched his lips. Then you came running out of those woods and everything changed. Hannah felt tears prick her eyes. I'm so sorry for bringing this trouble to you. Don't be, Flynn said softly, not sorry at all that I met you. The simple words, spoken with such quiet sincerity, made Hannah's heart swell. Before she could respond, the door opened and Jenkins returned. Wagon's ready, he announced. We need to move quickly while it's still dark. Moving Flynn was a painful process. He tried to hide his discomfort, but Hannah could see it in the tightness around his eyes, the way his jaw clenched as the ranch hands carefully lifted him onto a stretcher. They made a bed for him in the back of the wagon, padding it with blankets as best they could. Hannah insisted on riding in the back with him, supporting his head in her lap as they began the jolting journey back to the Jenkins ranch. The night was clear and cold, stars blazing overhead as they left the small town behind. Flynn drifted in and out of consciousness, occasionally mumbling words Hannah couldn't quite catch. She bathed his forehead with a damp cloth, trying to soothe the fever that seemed to be growing stronger. "Stay with me," she whispered when his breathing became labored. "Please, Flynn, stay with me." They were perhaps halfway to the ranch when Jenkins suddenly pulled the wagon to a halt, signaling for silence. Hannah froze, straining her ears in the darkness, hoofbeats coming from behind them. "Riders," Jenkins whispered, "at least 4 of them." Hannah's heart hammered against her ribs. "The Donovans," Jenkins nodded grimly, reaching for his rifle. "Take the reins," he instructed Hannah. "If shooting starts, don't stop for anything, head straight for the ranch." "I can't leave you, you can and you will," Jenkins cut her off. "Flynn needs a doctor's care, and you need to stay alive to testify against these bastards. Now get up here." Hannah carefully shifted Flynn's head onto a folded blanket and climbed onto the driver's seat. Jenkins and his men positioned themselves behind the wagon, rifles ready. The approaching riders were visible now, dark silhouettes against the starlit prairie. Hannah counted 5 of them, moving fast. "Get ready," Jenkins warned, his voice tight. Hannah gripped the reins, every muscle tense, her ears ringing with fear. Behind her, Flynn moaned softly, delirious with fever. The riders drew closer, close enough now that Hannah could make out the gleam of weapons in the starlight, her breath caught in her throat. Then from the east came another sound, more hoofbeats, many of them approaching rapidly. What the Jenkins began, over the rise came a dozen riders, moving in tight formation. At their head was a man in a distinctive hat, a cavalry officer. The Donovans pulled their horses up short, clearly surprised by this new development. The cavalry continued forward, surrounding them with military precision. "That's Captain Harding," Jenkins said, relief evident in his voice. "7th Cavalry out of Fort Robinson." Hannah watched in disbelief as the Donovans were disarmed and placed under arrest, offering surprisingly little resistance. The captain approached their wagon, tipping his hat politely to Hannah. "Mr. Jenkins," he greeted. "Seems we arrived at an opportune moment. How did you know?" Jenkins asked, bewildered. Captain Harding smiled slightly. "Let's just say we received information about the Donovan gang's activities, been tracking them for days. When we heard they'd attacked a rancher and were planning another ambush tonight, we picked up the pace." He glanced at Flynn's still form in the wagon. "He needs medical attention." "We're taking him to my ranch," Jenkins explained. "Doctor in town's already treated his wounds, but the fever's concerning." Harding nodded. "We'll escort you and the young lady." Hannah met his gaze steadily. "Hannah Blackburn, sir. My sister and I witnessed the Donovans murdering passengers on the stagecoach 3 days ago. They've been hunting us ever since." Understanding dawned in the captain's eyes. "Miss Blackburn, I believe the U.S. Marshal in Cheyenne would be very interested in your testimony. The Donovans have been terrorizing this territory for too long." "I'll testify," Hannah said firmly. "But first, I need to see Mr. O'Connor safely to the ranch." Captain Harding nodded respectfully. "Of course, my men and I will ensure you arrive safely." The rest of the journey passed without incident, the cavalry escort effectively deterring any further threat. Flynn's condition remained serious, his fever rising despite Hannah's efforts to cool him with damp cloths. They reached the Jenkins ranch just before dawn. Lily rushed out to meet them, tears of relief streaming down her face as she embraced her sister. Martha immediately took charge, directing the men to carry Flynn to the best bedroom and sending for herbs and medicines to fight the fever. For the next 2 days, Hannah barely left Flynn's side. She bathed his brow, spooned broth between his lips when he was lucid enough to swallow, and spoke to him softly during the long hours of delirium. Lily and Martha helped, but it was Hannah who refused to leave, even to sleep. On the 3rd morning, Hannah woke with a start, realizing she'd dozed off in the chair beside Flynn's bed. His eyes were open, clear and alert for the first time since they'd brought him from town. "You're still here," he said, his voice weak but steady. Hannah moved to the edge of the bed, joy flooding through her. "The fever's broken," she said, touching his forehead gently. "How long?" Flynn asked. 3 days, Hannah told him. The Donovans are in custody. The cavalry arrived just in time. Captain Harding wants us to testify in Cheyenne when you're well enough to travel. Flynn absorbed this information, then reached for her hand. You stayed with me through all of it. Of course I did, Hannah said softly. I couldn't leave you. Something shifted in Flynn's gaze, a warmth, a certainty. Why? Hannah's heart hammered in her chest. It was such a simple question, yet the answer would change everything. She took a deep breath, finding courage she didn't know she possessed. Because I love you, she said simply. I think I started falling in love with you the moment you opened your cabin door to us. It's fast and probably foolish, but it's true. Flynn's hand tightened around hers. Not foolish, he said, his voice husky with emotion. Hannah, I've been alone so long I'd forgotten what it felt like to care for someone, to need someone. Then you came and suddenly everything was different. He paused, swallowing hard. I love you too, heaven help me, but I do. Hannah's eyes filled with tears of joy as she leaned down to press her lips gently to his. The kiss was brief, tender, a promise of more to come when he was stronger. What about California? Flynn asked when they parted. Your uncle, the plans you made. Plans change, Hannah said, smiling through her tears. I'll write to my uncle, explain everything. Lily can still go if she wishes, but my home is here now, with you, if you'll have me. Flynn's answering smile was like the sun breaking through clouds. I'll have you, he said, lifting a hand to touch her cheek, for as long as you'll stay. The following weeks brought healing and new beginnings. Flynn regained his strength gradually, his recovery hastened by Hannah's constant care and the quiet joy that had blossomed between them. Lily, seeing her sister's happiness, decided to remain in Nebraska as well. At least for the time being, when Flynn was well enough to travel, they journeyed to Cheyenne, where Hannah and Lily testified against the Donovan gang. Their testimony, combined with evidence gathered by Captain Harding, ensured that justice was served. The outlaws were sentenced to hang for their crimes, bringing closure to the nightmare that had begun with the stagecoach robbery. Upon their return to Scottsbluff, Flynn took Hannah to his ranch. The Donovans had done some damage, but nothing that couldn't be repaired. Buckskin greeted them enthusiastically, fully recovered from his own injuries. Standing on the porch of the cabin where they had first met, Flynn took Hannah's hands in his. It's not much, he said, gesturing to the small homestead. Not what you're used to back east. Hannah looked around at the rolling hills, the small herd of cattle in the distance, the garden she would plant come spring. It's beautiful, she said sincerely. It's home. Flynn's eyes crinkled as he smiled. Not quite yet, he said, reaching into his pocket. He pulled out a simple gold band, worn but polished to a shine. This was my mother's. I've been carrying it, waiting for the right moment. He dropped to one knee, still holding her hand. Hannah Blackburn, will you marry me? Share this life with me, build something beautiful together. Hannah's heart felt too full for her chest. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I will marry you. They were married 2 weeks later in the Jenkins front parlor, with Lily as maid of honor and George Jenkins standing as Flynn's best man. Martha wept happy tears, and even Buckskin was allowed inside for the occasion, a blue ribbon tied around his neck. After the small reception, Flynn took his bride home to the ranch that would now be theirs together. As they crossed the threshold, he swept her into his arms, kissing her with all the passion that had been building between them. Welcome home, Mrs. O'Connor, he murmured against her lips. Hannah wound her arms around his neck, marveling at how this man, once a stranger who had opened his door to 2 terrified women, had become her whole world. I love you, Flynn O'Connor, she whispered. Until the end of my days. In the years that followed, the O'Connor ranch prospered and grew. Hannah planted gardens and painted the cabin walls with cheerful colors. Flynn built on an additional room when Lily decided to stay permanently, having found a position teaching at the new school in Scottsbluff. When their first child was born, a son they named James, after Flynn's father, their joy was complete. The baby's arrival the following spring coincided with a bountiful calving season and the best crop of hay the ranch had ever produced. Standing on the porch one evening, their son sleeping peacefully in his cradle inside, Hannah leaned against her husband's strong shoulder. Sometimes I think about that night, she said softly. Running through the woods, terrified, not knowing if we'd live to see morning. How strange that the worst night of my life led me to the greatest happiness I've ever known. Flynn wrapped his arm around her, pulling her close against the evening chill. "The Lord works in mysterious ways," he said, echoing Martha Jenkins' words from long ago. Hannah smiled, turning her face up to his for a kiss. "Not so mysterious. He knew exactly what he was doing when he led us to your door." As the stars came out over the Nebraska prairie, Hannah O'Connor said a silent prayer of gratitude for the journey that had brought her here from terror to safety, from danger to love, from running to home. The path had been perilous, but the destination was everything she could have wished for and more. 2 years later, Hannah gave birth to their daughter, Elizabeth. The family continued to thrive, with Flynn expanding their cattle operation and Hannah starting a small business selling preserves and baked goods in town. Lily eventually married the local doctor, a kind young man who had come to Scottsbluff to establish his practice. On the 5th anniversary of the day they met, Flynn surprised Hannah with a new, larger house built adjacent to the original cabin. "Room for our growing family," he explained, showing her the 4 bedrooms, spacious kitchen, and parlor with a piano he'd ordered all the way from Denver. Hannah wept with joy as she explored their new home. "It's perfect," she told him, stepping into his embrace. "Just like you," Flynn replied, kissing her tenderly. "You ran into my life when I least expected it and gave me everything I never knew I wanted." "And to think," Hannah said, her eyes shining with happiness, "it all began because I was running from outlaws with my sister close, and a cowboy hit us both until all the danger passed." Flynn smiled, drawing her closer. "Best thing I ever did, opening that door." Hannah rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "For both of us, my love, for both of us." As twilight settled over the Nebraska prairie, the O'Connor family gathered on the porch of their new home. Flynn, Hannah, James, Elizabeth, and Buckskin, now gray around the muzzle but still loyal as ever. Lily and her husband joined them for dinner, bringing news of expecting their first child. Their lives had found a rhythm as steady and true as the season's spring calving, summer harvests, autumn roundups, and winter evenings by the fire. There were challenges, of course, drought years, harsh winters, the ordinary difficulties of frontier life. But they faced them together, their love only deepening with each passing year. And sometimes, on quiet nights when the children were asleep, Hannah and Flynn would sit on their porch and look up at the stars, remembering those desperate days that had brought them together, grateful for the chance encounter that had changed their lives forever. What had begun as a desperate flight from danger had become a journey to love, proving that even in the darkest moments, light and hope could be found if you were brave enough to open the door.